Avatar, yeah, I think I don't know how I feel about having a bunch of kids as the headline cards for that set. I feel like in Magic we don't have a lot of kids as main characters.
No, apart from Aminatu, I think.
Yeah, and that's not super common.
Yeah, and she's not
I think
really a normal kid.
that and there's only like what 4 cards.
Yeah, she started as a commander character, I think, and then ended up
Yeah,
entering the mainline story. Avatar, it's something I discovered later in life, actually during the pandemic, but it's an impeccably good show.
it is.
And even Legend of Korra, for all its faults, is very thought provoking and very
There's a lot of good ideas in Korra, and I just think they don't stick the landing with a lot of them.
but a lot. It's very poignant. I had feels at the end of it. The question I have, which is a bit more simple, is Avatar is a world where there's 4 elements. How do we fit that in 5 colors of magic?
Oh, that is actually a very good question. Because yeah, I remember like when I first started playing Magic, I assumed that the land, like each little symbol, it's like fire magic and water magic and death magic and sun magic, I guess. And then yeah, very quickly was corrected that that's not how that works. But there is that association of red is mostly associated with fire, green is mostly associated with nature.
Yeah, early Magic very much leaned into that.
Yeah, versus now it's a bit more conceptual. There's like I've got the Magic coasters that have the mana symbol, and then they've got like a bunch of words printed around it in a circle, and there's a bunch of like different ideas. And so yeah, there's a lot more conceptual associations with each color rather than more direct literal associations. How would you integrate Avatar into that? That's actually a really good question.
And I mean,
there's a reason I'm not a game designer. I think that's a good place to start. Right?
It might be things have to go into 3 color sets or color pairs, so that, I mean, if you think about it, the air temple's kind of Jeskai. I mean, the same stylings, but that's kind of what they are as in any case.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe it maps pretty closely to Tarkia. The Earth Kingdom's kind of Abzan, both in form, style, and kind of what they stand for. The Fire Nation could be Mardu or could be Grixis. They're not that evil though.
See, that's the thing where I think like a lot of it is going to come down to like interpretations of a character. Like I wouldn't say that General Iroh particularly fits in Mardu all that much.
He's white though.
Yeah,
and the thing is,
I wouldn't have any like, yeah. To me, like Iroh would be like red white, like just Boros.
Yeah, he could be Boros, but he could be red white. And I think he would have been more red white with a tinge of black because he did fight for the War Machine and believe in its cause until he stopped.
But the Iroh that we see in the series is, I would say, very distinctly Boros versus the Iroh that there's all the mythology around, the Great War Leader. Yes, there is that element of black to it. But I think the Iroh that's trying to guide Zuko into being a better person, really, is very distinctly Boros because he still has that element of rage and power in him that I think the red would represent quite well. But he's still a very balanced, very reserved, very reflective person. And I think
maybe he fits in that. Sorry, he would still fit in a Mardu grouping, but as Boros himself. I mean, he's almost
and then like a black pip for like an activated.
But of course, he doesn't have to be Mardu himself, for example. But if the whole faction if the Fire Nation is Mardu, who's left?
That's the thing. I don't think you can clump the entire nations into a particular color. I think that's where it would get tricky of like, okay, so like what color would earthbending be? To me, I think green and red are like the colors that come to mind. But then there are earthbenders that I think would be a great fit for green and red. And then there's others that I'm like, I don't know where I would place you because you don't really fit with the same ideology.
Particularly with the metal bending later on as well. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking earthbending is green just because the Earth Kingdom is green, but really it's kind of gruely, but they're more solid. That's why
like I know a lot of stuff in red has these implications of like magma, of like boulders being thrown and stuff like that. So that's where I'm getting the red. But still, like throwing boulders and stuff, like in the Lord of the Rings set, there's a couple of cards that throw boulders.
Yes.
Or create boulder tokens. And I'm pretty sure all of those are in red.
Yeah, so last thought for Avatar is the Water Kingdom.
Azorius, straight away.
Yeah. The colours are probably right. They're just not Azorius.
No, yeah, exactly. Like if you just think of like Azorius and Magic, and I think the associations on a conceptual level as to what we associate with blue and white, I think they fit. But then stylistically, no.
No. But blue and white in other ways. So because I think Azorius emphasizes the blue control element a lot more. Whereas if you take blue as being the element of water rather than control, it's a different focus. It's somewhat like how you have Boros and Lorehold in red and white. And Lorehold is obviously quite a big deviation from what you'd understand red-white to be, but it makes sense that you can get there. The difficulty again with this avatar analysis is that air is also a blue element as well as water. And that means two of our elements are blue.
That is a good point. Yeah, I think it's really interesting that like water in particular in Magic is something that is very distinctly blue versus we have representations of fire in just about every color. Like it's not that uncommon to see fire in white in particular and black. But water, you don't really see outside of blue. I can't think of any cards that represent water symbolically or literally outside of blue.
It's a challenge for me in the editing suite to work out if I can find one, but I can't think of one to mind at the moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Part of it is 3 of the colors don't represent any element per se.
Yeah.
So green, black, and white are very much more conceptual. And I think it's because in Richard Garfield's imagination, the colors and the mana relate to places, not to elements. Now, we often shortcut them to elements because red and blue in particular, but sun, skull, and tree don't fit in that taxonomy. And so I think, Magic players who are baby Magic players look at, water power and fire power, but of course that's not how it actually operates for the other 3 colors of mana.
Yeah.
And so how you split that up with Avatar is it's going to be an interesting bit of game design.
I think for me, I go straight to white for air, just because of these days there's so much flying in white that's just the association I make. Like I'm thinking, angels and birds and stuff like that. But
blue as well. See, this blue-white flyers is a common thing. So that makes the air blue-white, but then you add the red for the Jeskai-ness, I suppose. But they're not really. The air temple are not particularly red.
No, I think Aang in particular, he's got that impulsivity because he hasn't had all the training. So I think I could see, like
so he could be Jeskai.
Yeah, but and I guess that's one of the potentially really fun spaces of the air nomad tribe is not something that's really present in the show. So there's really just one character to be focusing on in that element.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who the factions are.
Have they specified if it's going to be like original series or original series in Korra, or they're just doing like in that world and they're not necessarily tying it directly to the narrative of the shows?
I will have a look now.
Because that could be really interesting. Of it's just kind of like how the Lord of the Rings set is just in Middle Earth, and it's not directly tied to a narrative. It's tied to a lot of characters and themes from Middle Earth, but there's not a direct story for it. That could be interesting, and I guess it's kind of the same with like Final Fantasy and Spider-Man. They're drawing from those worlds without trying to paint a story with it.
Well, this one Reddit post comment says, "It should be noted, this won't include anything from the Legend of Korra. It is only going to be from The Last Airbender." Maybe that's from the announcement video. I'm not going to turn that on now to watch, but who knows?
Reddit, always very reliable, yeah.
So we might leave it there. That's an interesting point to leave it on. We'll park this thought about what Avatar Flavor is going to be like and see what they do. And we'll have to bookmark this and come back and see how wrong we were.
It's gonna be really interesting. I am excited for it, not so much to play it, but just to see what ideas they explore with it.
Thanks for joining us on MTG Flavoursauce. If you like what you see, please like, share, or subscribe. See ya!